Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye. Nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya. Bhagavati uttama shloke bhakti bhavati naishtiki. Thank you very much. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Janamadasya yato anvayat itarataschartheshu bhikya swarat tene brahma hridaya adikavaye muyanti yatsurayah tejo varimridang yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha Dhamna sena sada nirasta kuhukam satyam param dhimahi dharma projita kaitavatra paramo niramatsara nam satam vedyam vastavam atra vastu shivadam tapatrayana mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni krite kimva pareirishara Sadhya ridya varudyati atra kritivi shushrushuvi tachanat Nigama kalpa taror galitam balam Shukamukhadam rita drava sangyutam Pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam Muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavuka. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th Canto, Chapter 9, the Supreme Character of Jad Bharat, text number 3. I'll just sing this myself. Tatarapi sajana sangacha brisham udavijamano bhagavata karma bhanda vidavansana Shravana smarana gunak vivarana Charanaravinda yugalam manasa vidadhat Atmanaha pratighatam Ashankamano Bhagavad anugraha Bhagavad anugrahena Anusmrita sva Purva janamavali Atmanam unamata jada anda badhira Swarupena darshayam asa lokasya. Please repeat. Tatra api. In that Brahmana birth, in that Brahmana birth also, Swajana Sangat, from association with relatives and friends, Cha, and Brisham, greatly, Udvijamanaha, being always afraid that he would fall down again. Bhagavata, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Karma Bandha, the bondage of the reactions of fruitive activities. Vidvansana, which vanquishes. Shravana, hearing. Smarana, remembering. Guna Vivrana, hearing descriptions of the qualities of the Lord. Charana Aravinda, lotus feet. Yugalam, the two. Manasa, with the mind. Vidadhat, always thinking of. Atmanaha, of his soul. Pratighatam, obstruction on the path of devotional service. Ashankamana, always fearing. Bhagavat Anugrahena, by the special mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anusmrita, remembered. Swapurva, his own previous. Janma Avalihi, string of births. Atmanam, himself. Unmata, mad. Jada, dull. Andha, blind. Badhira, and deaf. Sarupena, with these features. Darshayam asa, he exhibited. Lokasya, to people in general. Translation. Due to his being especially gifted with the Lord's mercy, Bharat Maharaj could remember the incidents of his past life. Although he received the body of a Brahmana, he was still very much afraid of his relatives and friends who were not devotees. He was always very cautious of such association because he feared that he would again fall down. Consequently, he manifested himself before the public eye as a madman, dull, blind, and deaf, so that others would not try to talk to him. In this way, he saved himself from bad association. Within, he was always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord and chanting the Lord's glories, which save one from the bondage of fruitive action. In this way, he saved himself from the onslaught of non-devotee associates. It makes it longer, but it's worth repeating this translation. Please repeat. Due to his being especially gifted with the Lord's mercy, Bharat Maharaj could remember the incidents of his past life. Although he received the body of a Brahmana, he was still very much afraid of his relatives and friends who were not devotees. He was always very cautious of such association because he feared that he would again fall down. Consequently, he manifested himself before the public eye as a madman, dull, blind, and deaf, so that Others would not try to talk to him. In this way, he saved himself from bad association. Within, he was always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord and chanting the Lord's glories, which save one from the bondage of fruitive action. In this way, he saved himself from the onslaught of non-devotee associates. Purport. Every living entity is bound by different activities due to association with the modes of nature. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Karanam guna sangha asya sad asad yoni janmasu. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus, he meets with good and evil among various species. Bhagavad Gita chapter 13, text 22. We get different types of bodies among 8,400,000 species according to our karma. Karmana daiva netrena. We work under the influence of material nature contaminated by the three modes. And thus, we get a certain type of body according to superior order. This is called karma bandha. To get out of this karma bandha, one must engage himself in devotional service. Then, one will not be affected by the modes of material nature. Mam chaya vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahmabhuyaya kalpata. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Bhagavad Gita chapter 14, text 26. To remain immune from the material qualities, one must engage himself in devotional service. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu. That is the perfection of life. When Maharaj Bharat took birth as a Brahmana, he was not very interested in the duties of a Brahmana, but within he remained a pure Vaishnava, always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord. As advised in Bhagavad Gita, Manmana bhava mad bhakta mad yaji mam namaskuru. This is the only process by which one can be saved from the danger of repeated birth and death. Om jnana timirandasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshura unamilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In this verse, we're learning about the performance of devotional service within one's mind. There are two considerations why Bharat Maharaj could not perform devotional service with his body. One is that he had experience from his previous life wherein he was bodily engaged in performing devotional service, but by his mind he had become distracted by a deer. And the other was that the performance of bodily devotional service sometimes attracts unwanted attention from others, cheap adoration, distinction, and praise. So with these two considerations, Bharat Maharaj, now he is Jad Bharat, dull Bharat, very slow, very unable to understand others. He performs devotional service in the mind. Shri Shri Gaurnitai, Shri Shri Krishna Balram, Shri Shri Radha Shyam Sundar ki Jai. From this we can learn a number of lessons. One is that we have to take account of our own particular situation and also our particular level of advancement. In Bharat Maharaj's case, he knew the art of performing devotional service within the mind. He was trained. He had full recollection of his previous devotional service. So he was not starting from zero. So he decided that I must continue that process from where I left it. The need was not there for any external performance, such as devotees in the temple will engage. So he was not subject to sadhana bhakti regulations. He was in Raganuga. He already had attraction for the Lord. It's explained here. Shravana Smarana Guna Vivarana Charanar Vinda Yugalam Manasa Vidadhad. So Vidadhad, he Manmana, he was always thinking. He was always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord. He was able to think of the Lord. He was not distracted in his mind in this life. So therefore there was no call, there was no need for externally exhibiting what was going on internally. Another thing we learn is that because he wanted to be uninterrupted, he purposely behaved like a dull person with others. This is to protect his consciousness, his meditation. So this is appropriate. It cannot be imitated, but when you're in the particular situation that Jad Bharat found himself, this was very intelligent. behavior on his part. And so what we learn from that is not that we must become dull, but that we must be sensible, intelligent enough to understand our own situation and do that which is appropriate to enhancing our devotional service. Now, he became very conscious that all the people around him, they were less on a lower platform of consciousness than he was. So he did not want to have any interaction, because when you have an interaction, you are influenced by that association, naturally. So in order to avoid, he became dull. So in our case, we may need interaction, because without that interaction, because we're not trained to think of Krishna's lotus feet all the time, we will deprive ourselves of good association. In the case of Bharat Maharaj, there was no better association around him. Later on we find out that he doesn't stay dull all the time. He manifests his level of Krishna consciousness when he speaks to King Rahugana. But for now, he's behaving in a dull fashion. Very important. So this is not to glorify when a person is very dull, very slow in understanding. This is to glorify the intelligence of a person who understands the importance of his life, that he makes whatever adjustments are necessary to protect his devotional service. In the previous life, he was somewhat negligent. He allowed himself to become influenced by an interaction with an animal. So he was conscious of this mistake when he became an animal. So he decided, I will not make this mistake again. So this is the kind of lesson we can all learn, that according to our level of advancement, we need to make some adjustments in life that are conducive for our devotional service. The verse is that anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya vivarjana. So we have to adopt those activities which are anukul, which are favorable for devotional service. Sankalpa, we should accept. We should foster those activities or those ideas or that way of life. And pratikulyasya vivarjanam, we should avoid those things are detrimental. So they all depend upon where you are. What may be appropriate for one devotee may be inappropriate for another devotee at a different level. So who is to decide? How do you decide? The first decision has to be made by you, actually, by your sincerity. If you are sincere, you will not seek to deceive yourself, to cheat yourself. You will not adopt a path which actually defeats the goal. The goal is to become Krishna conscious. So if we fail to become Krishna conscious, what is the point? So the second consideration is to seek the guidance of a person who is expert in understanding you. It's a bit like when we have a disease. First, I make the determination that I have a disease and I should do something. But because we have limited knowledge of how to cure my disease, then I go to a person who is not limited as I am. we approach him, because he is more expert, more experienced. Srila Prabhupada, in a lecture, he says, a spiritual master is a person who is experienced in spiritual life. So when we're inexperienced, we need to go to an experienced person, Anubhavi, somebody who already has gone through all the stages, understands us. The doctor, he understands. He's not guessing, he's not gambling. That's a good doctor, and you want his advice. So Bharat Maharaj did not need in this life such a doctor, because he had full recollection of his previous life. For him, it was the same life carrying on. Just like for us, we don't say it's a new life because I'm 40 years old from when I was 10 years old. Because we have full recollection, you see. Therefore it's one life. Bharat Maharaj, he had recollection not only of when he was 10, but when he was a deer. And when he was the king's son, Lord Rishabh's son, he had full recollection. So he's still living the one life because of the recollection. The word here is Swa Purva Janma Avali. Avali is like Deepavali, Avali, a row, a whole string, one after another. So we don't have Purva Janma Avali. Ours is, we're fortunate if we remember this life usually, because we forget. And actually that's another important point. If you forget, you have to learn your lessons again, because you can't benefit from something you have forgotten. So it's no good saying, for example, I studied Bhagavad Gita 30 years ago, but if you have forgotten the lesson, they do not benefit you. It's the ability to recollect that allows you to say, I studied 30 years ago, and it's ever fresh. Sandipani Muni, he blessed Lord Krishna and Sudama that they will, all the lessons of the Vedas will be ever fresh in their mind. A wonderful blessing. So if you forget, then really you have to go over it again, because you cannot benefit from something you have forgotten. So Bharat Maharaj had not forgotten. He remembered. Avali, not the last life, string of lives. Purva Janma, all his past lives. And because of that, he did not need to learn the lesson of thinking of Krishna, because he used to do that. He is just reviving where he left off previously. But this time with determination. This time making sure that he will not make a mistake. It's like preempting something from happening. Preempting means you take a course of action that stops something developing. Now, what was he preempting? Preempting bad association. Because what was his mistake? He got intimate with an animal. An animal by nature is an animal. He cannot give you higher association. He is bound by the three modes of nature of that body. It's helpless. So when you become intimate, you are going to be affected. The animal will not be affected by you, but you will be affected by the animal. So, therefore, Jad, he is becoming non-associatable. He doesn't want any such mistake, not only of an animal, but even of a human now. A human who is not on his level of Krishna consciousness, who is not sympathetic, who will not understand. This time, he doesn't go to the forest. Last time he went to the forest. And in the forest he fell down. So this time, he's doing what is important. It's not the external environment. At a certain level of Krishna consciousness, it's not the external environment. It's your internal situation, your consciousness. What are you meditating on? What are you thinking of? That's important. So even in the Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami explains the process of external practices of devotional service. They are to help the internal situation, where a devotee always thinks of Krishna. Prabhupada one time said that you should mold your life in such a way that you cannot forget Krishna even for a moment. So that's the idea. That's the idea behind all these rules and regulations. So Bharat Maharaj is giving a lesson for a person who is able to think of Krishna always. There's a pitfall for that person if he becomes negligent of who he associates with. Now, in modern day, we don't have so much fear of a deer, but people voluntarily associate with cats, with dogs, with pet mice, like that. That's animal. But then, so now you see, they always say, oh, he loves me. The animal loves me. The animal does not have the capacity. But you superimpose that idea upon the animal. So now what's happening is the animal's modes of nature are being passed on to you. You will become an animal. So the same process happens with human association. Whilst everyone has 2 hands and 2 legs, but everyone is not on the same level of consciousness. So an intelligent person, he can discriminate between high level of consciousness and low level of consciousness. And you have to discriminate. That's knowledge. If you don't know how to discriminate, you should acquire that knowledge. It's a bit like going shopping for a diamond, but if you can't tell the difference between a glass and a diamond, don't buy a diamond, because you don't know. First you need to acquire the knowledge to be able to distinguish between a glass and diamond, and between different kinds of diamonds, high quality, low quality. So similarly, human life is meant for this kind of education. So Srila Prabhupada would always criticize the West, the materialistic civilization, for this fault, that you're becoming educated in every which way except the most important one, which is to be able to understand what is high level of consciousness. You're neglecting the most important facility or opportunity that you have. You have this wonderful opportunity, but you're neglecting it. All because you are trying to enhance your eating, your sleeping, your mating and defending. So he would say that's very foolish. And indeed, an intelligent person can understand that is foolish. There is no redeeming quality about becoming a polished animal. Because shrama eva hi kevalam. You've simply wasted your entire life for something you didn't even need a human form for. It was already there. All that effort, endeavor was not needed. That so-called education, to live that kind of eating, sleeping, mating, defending, was not necessary. I one time gave the example previously of a person known to me in my family. In our circle, he was known as Gutta Chap. He did not know how to sign. He had to use his thumbprint. He became not a crorepati, he became an arapati. So then there are all these other guys trying to acquire education just to be a servant of one of these people. Without education, he has 100 accountants working for him, and thousands of managers, and tens of thousands of ordinary workers who have acquired an education to become one of his servants. And he didn't. Because these things come of their own accord. Yadrichaya chaupapanam. They're obtained without extraneous effort. Because your karma, just like your suffering comes uninvited, without an Excel sheet, without a spreadsheet, the result of suffering comes to you. Your good life, money, health, your marriage comes to you of its own accord, without separate endeavor. So the human life especially allows you to understand, it gives you the opportunity to do what Jat Bharat is doing. That you don't have to have another birth again. But that requires education. That education. Engineering education will not help you. Being a doctor will not help you. Therefore you have to Kaumaram Acharet Pragyo Dharman Bhagavatam. This education. Srimad Bhagavatam. One must be educated. We have a morning program, but ideally Srila Prabhupada would say sometimes read one chapter a day. Every day. So sometimes people ask, I don't know what to do with my life. This is what you should do. You should give your time. And when you start doing it, you realize you don't have enough time. Because there's so much to do, so much to cover. And that was the realization of Bharat, Jat Bharat. He realized, I cannot afford to waste even a moment. Avyartha kalatvam. So he did not even at the expense of not reciprocating with his loving father. His father's efforts to educate him proved hopeless. The father tried again and again and again. And he did not reciprocate, because this time he was serious. Not only no dear, not anybody, not anything. Very important. But he could do it. And because internally, without break, apratihata, without any break, he was thinking of Krishna all the time. So that's what Prabhupada points out in the purport. Mam chayo avyabhicharena. That kind of bhakti which was avyabhichari, that was unfailing, who does not fall down in any circumstance. He was doing that bhakti. So sagunan, so he transcended his modes of nature. He perfected his life. Now, there are a number of points still, but there are a number of questions also. If you have any questions, then I'll take them. There's no mic, right?